Welcome into the EMA Online podcast. Mason Voth, Alec Bussey here with you from EMA Online and Rivals. Head on over there and get signed up if you're not and follow along with the Cats. A lot of good stuff coming your way, especially since it is the lead up to the weekend. So Friday, always plenty of stuff to get to. You get to listen to this great podcast. We will also have the pick and preview up later today for K-State and Iowa State tomorrow, and another perk of Friday, the annual weekly bracket watch that I've been throwing up there because just like Alec Bussey, you all love bracketology at a very high level, and you love to see all the different matchups. So that's what I've been trying to do. I've been curating and aggregating the most notable bracketologists or outlets that produce bracketology and throwing them up there and kind of showing you where K-State is, how they stack up, and what I think of the specific matchups, because the way it's working out right now, and we talked about this, I mean, it's been probably close to a month ago now, the bracket math of who K-State might end up playing doesn't really seem to be the best outcome for them, solely due to the fact that a lot of the teams that are these fringe opponents or whatever, they're loaded with bigs, and K-State can't really handle that. We've seen that in big physical games. If a team has a big that is probably their best player or a legit threat, they can struggle. And so looking around, that's a tough pill to swallow for K-State. So be on the lookout for that. It'll be up today, and a lot of other stuff coming your way, of course, tomorrow after K-State Iowa State takes place. So a lot to get into, and let's start with talking about the Cyclones, Alec. They are coming off a very comfortable win over TCU on Wednesday night. TCU was without Mike Miles again. It kind of seems like for TCU, they were able to hang on long enough. They fought really well at home against Baylor without Miles, but they desperately need him back to help move the ball better. And with the way that they play, they don't shoot the three very well. So to get kind of their bigs involved and some of the other guys to be able to score, you have to have the threat of Mike Miles being able to drive and get into the lane and score that way or dump it off. And they just don't have that right now. There's no real threat at the guard position for TCU.
No, and obviously losing Mike Miles is a big thing. And I honestly feel bad for TCU. Coming into the year, this is a team that was expected to be potentially near the top of the Big 12. You know, a lot of people had them as maybe the third best team, fourth best team in the league. And the injury luck that the Horned Frogs have had is just really tough. But no one's complaining when you get it because everyone's kind of going through injuries at this point. Everyone's kind of going through their own things. And unfortunately for TCU, it's injuries to two of their better players. But I would say it gets a big win. They end a 2-game losing streak, which included an away game at West Virginia and a home loss to Oklahoma State. I believe that was their first home loss of the season that they took on Saturday against Oklahoma State. So a big opportunity for Iowa State to kind of get right back at Hilton Coliseum against TCU, and they did that with a 70-59 win. And now they get a big opportunity to go on the road in the Big 12 and play a Kansas State team that is obviously reeling. We've talked about a lot this week about the struggles that K-State's had. So it's a good opportunity, I think, for each team to kind of right the ship. For Iowa State, it's a big opportunity to maybe get back on some winning ways. And for K-State, it's an opportunity to end a losing streak against a quality team at home. And certainly an opponent that I think K-State should feel like that they could get revenge against, considering the loss that they had earlier this year, an 80-76 loss at Hilton Coliseum, where obviously Iowa State had a lot of success with Osuna having a few buckets in the last portion of the game. And that's kind of when the struggles on the interior really kind of raised a concern, I guess you could say, for K-State. So good opportunity to see how much better each team has gotten since that game earlier this season. Was that in February, I think? Late January?
It was January still. It was like
January 24th.
Mid to late January. But yeah, here's the thing. Has K-State gotten worse since that game? Like the way things are going? I mean, this team still has the potential to be a good team and can do stuff with this season, but they've got to lock in right now. I think not only have we seen some like the on-court issues with like turnovers and whatever that you can point to, but I think Tuesday they started to be a little bit more upfront that this team needs to buy in again with each other. I think early in the season, they were able to ride off of the momentum and energy of everything going on. And then once you have that kind of tail off, and you can kind of pinpoint maybe what game it was, it seems like the home loss to Texas was probably the start of this spin where you blow a double-digit halftime lead, you have a great crowd, you fight back to have a lead within the last minute of the game, and you lose. And at that point, then K-State is able to get the win against TCU, but now back-to-back losses to Texas Tech and Oklahoma, the last place team in the league. I think that there are some cracks here, and Marquise Noel talked about like the team needs to come together a little bit better. Said, go out, watch a movie, get something to eat, do whatever together. And Jerome Tang, I think, just wants this team to kind of think about what's played out the last two games and make them really take some ownership of it. So I think this team is working through some stuff right now, and that's really where the issues have come from. And once you get into a spot where things are starting to go in a negative direction, you start to push harder than you should. And I think that's probably what's contributed over the last 3-4 weeks to the raising level of turnovers for Marquise Noel. He's not getting a ton of help elsewhere. And so for a guy that was off to such a good start and was easily carrying the load for K-State, now teams are able to defend him better, and he's having to feel like he still has to do that. And he kind of does based off of the performance that he's gotten from some of his teammates. And it's just tough to do, and it's going to lead to a lot of bad outcomes. And unfortunately, for K-State, bad outcomes individually from Marquise Noel and other guys on this team tend to add up to losses to the worst two teams in this league, which, again, if those two teams are in any other league this year, they're possibly an NCAA tournament team, maybe likely an NCAA tournament team. We've talked about that a couple of weeks ago, you, me, and Gabe, about the tiers of the Big 12. And it seems like, there's a top tier with Kansas, Baylor, and Texas. And then there's a tier in the middle with everybody else. And then OU and Texas Tech are kind of down there at the bottom in their own. And, I forget what the language was and what category you or Gabe threw them in, but I said, like, their tier is that they just need to find a new conference, because if they were in any other conference, I think those teams are probably in the tournament. And we've seen that. So K-State, just like, this is a bad combination for a Big 12 team. Everybody's gone through it at stretches this year. Iowa State obviously has gone through it. There's a reason why they're sitting around the same spot as K-State now. TCU, similar deal. Oklahoma State, they had theirs early in the season, but Oklahoma State is playing like a better team in the conference now. So there's just a lot going on, and this isn't a league where you can survive some of those games. And if you were in the Pac-12 or something, maybe you run into a game against a bottom feeder, or a game in like the ACC where they've got some really putrid teams, but it's just not going to work out in the Big 12. Big East, you would at least have Georgetown. K-State needs to get a game with Georgetown on the schedule pronto, get things right for them.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the struggles that K-State's had. Looking at their last 5 games, they've only won 4 of them, but within those last 5 games, Marquise Noel obviously has really struggled. Like you said, he's making just 21% of his threes in the last 5 games, which is well below his season average, which I think is around like 34% right now from 3. And that's obviously fallen a lot from where it was earlier in the season. At one point, I think he got up to around 38%. But he's also seen his assist numbers fall in the last 5 games to under 5, which is well below his season average, which I think is actually closer to 7 or 8. And then his turnovers are actually exceeding his assists over the last 5 games, 5.6 turnovers to just 4.8 assists. So the biggest key for K-State, I think, to kind of get this thing spinning in a positive direction is to get Marquise Noel back on a positive turn. And you kind of talk to and listen to some of the players and coaches after loss at Oklahoma State. And, people are taking him away. They're hard hedging. They're not allowing him to get into the paint in ball screens. They're not allowing him to get easy opportunities after a ball screen for an open perimeter jump shot. And you kind of combine all those things, and it's become a lot more difficult for Marquise Noel to have success. And I think it's important now for Jerome Tang and his coaching staff to put Marquise Noel in situations and actions to allow him to get open shots, allow him to facilitate to teammates more easily. And if you do those things, I think it gives K-State an opportunity to kind of get back on their winning ways. But it's tough to do that because getting against a hard hedge is hard. It forces Noel to do a lot of different things off the ball, a lot of off-ball actions. And, there's not a lot of guys that K-State has right now, I think, that they feel confident in putting on the ball in many situations. I think the other option is really at this point Desi Sills, because you don't feel very confident in the ball handling capabilities of Keontae Johnson. And I don't really feel like you have another guard that you can put the ball in their hands and trust them to really facilitate the offense. So K-State needs Marquise Noel to get going again.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right about that. And looking for somebody else to put the ball in his hands, like it's tough because, I mean, Desi is actually outside of the game at OU. The 3 games prior to that, he had been in double figures and had been somewhat efficient with it. The problem is, I mean, like he banks in the 3 against Texas Tech, so it's a little bit fluky. He's still shooting 25% from 3 on the season, so it's much better than where it was to start the year. But it's still not like you can rely on him to do that. And then like he's pretty reliant on getting into the lane and trying to do some stuff there. And I don't know, teams just have had an easy time stopping the K-State because outside of the first half against Oklahoma, we hadn't seen their bigs outside of Keontae Johnson be a threat in a while. So that was certainly a step in the right direction. The issue now just becomes like, is it repeatable? Can you do that again? And can you find a way to make it last throughout an entire game? Because once Oklahoma realized what they were doing wrong and how they were susceptible to Naquan Tomlin and Bebe Igiola, they made a correction, and it took away what was really keeping K-State afloat in the first half of that game and helped them get out to a pretty strong start because K-State wasn't making their shots on Tuesday. And that's another thing that K-State's going to have to do better. They're going to have to start shooting the 3 again at a better clip. We talked about it on Wednesday. Like K-State, when they're at their peak, should look like or similar to a not as strong version of Baylor right now. And it's tough to do that when you just don't have the guards. We went through it all. We hashed it out on Wednesday. K-State just doesn't have the guard play or the guard depth right now that Baylor would, and they've had that for a long time in Waco. So K-State's going to have to just continue to find a way to grind through it. Marquise Noel, no doubt, has to be better. Keontae Johnson, no doubt, has to be better. Same goes for every individual player on this team for K-State. But on the flip side of that, Jerome Tang and his staff need to be better right now because at some point you can't just, chalk this up to being all on the players and not performing well. This coaching staff needs to do some coaching and get them into a position where, okay, this isn't working for us. Here's what we need to do to get this going. And it's weird because this staff does seem to be pretty good at scheming some things up at times in game. They're great out of timeouts. They're great, I'm going to be Mr. Basketball guy on their blobs, on their blobs, so I can sound pretentious. But they need to be better about it throughout the entirety of a game, of getting K-State schemed to a point where the offense can be a little bit better, because that's really what's killed them recently. I mean, Oklahoma shot it really well against them, and part of that's on defensive breakdowns, but K-State offensively scoring in the 60s in their last 2 games against bottom tier teams in the league, it's just not going to get it done. You got to be better than that. You got to be able to achieve that at a higher level, and K-State didn't.
Yeah, and like you talked about the 3-point shooting over the last couple games, K-State's gone to combine 10 of 46 from beyond the 3-point line. Certainly not a very good percentage there.
Good.
K-State needs to be better from that perspective. And I think it's also tough from the standpoint of you were behind in those games. You kind of maybe had to start jacking some triples up, which makes things a little bit more difficult. But at the same time, you don't want to be shooting that low of a percentage.
Nope, they got to get better about that. Iowa State, we've talked a little bit about what their recent stretch has been. They got the win against TCU that they needed on Wednesday, but Saturday they lost at home for the first time to Oklahoma State. They also in there had tossed in a loss to West Virginia the week prior in the midweek. So they're a weird team to figure out right now, because there are times where they will really shut down and not look very good. They blew a 23-point second half lead at Texas Tech just a week before K-State went down there and lost. So it's not one of those deals where like they're similar in some regards to K-State. The one thing they have, though, is much more reliable options all throughout the floor. Gabe Kalsher is kind of the main man. He's probably their most talented player that they have on the floor, and he's going to give you a pretty much consistent performance every night. And then you have some wild cards with Jaron Holmes and Caleb Grill that are on any given night can go and put up big numbers for you. And those two guys shoot at a very good number from three. Both are near 38% from three on the season, which should scare the daylight out of K-State right now. And then not to mention, they got wrecked inside the first time they played Iowa State. That was kind of the first time. We talked about K-State, really needing to figure out stuff with second chance points in the paint, all this they got dominated by. And then the biggest concern for me is that Jazz Kuntz is back for Iowa State. And he's a guy that's had success against K-State last year, hit some big shots when they played Manhattan, and K-State had a chance to win last year. Iowa State won it. And then in K-State's overtime win in Ames last season, Jazz Kuntz went off for 19, and he can stretch the floor, which is similar to what Tanner Groves was able to do with K-State, where Groves was overly physical at times inside, was not happy about it, and then obviously can step out and knock down the three. So it's a little bit of a worry facing this Iowa State team because as a whole, they're shooting 35% from three. And that's, to me, been the weakest part of K-State's game the last few games.
Yeah, you talked about some of the interior struggles that K-State had against Iowa State earlier this season. Osuna goes for 16 points in that game, and obviously does pretty well doesn't do very well on the glass, I should say, with just 3 rebounds, but 16 points is pretty impressive. And 17 second chance points for Iowa State in that game. So it kind of says a lot, I think, about the struggles that K-State had on the interior. Iowa State has 28 rebounds. They win the rebounding matchup with K-State that night too, by a 28-20 advantage. And the Cyclones also get 9 offensive rebounds. So it's important for K-State to be better on the interior, especially against Osuna, who is one of the bigger bigs in the league this year. Is he an All-American level big? No, absolutely not. But he's a quality player. They definitely enjoyed his transfer. I believe he came from St. Bonaventure, if I remember correctly. And obviously, they've got really good play out of guys like Jaron Holmes and Tamin Lipsey. Both of them are in double figures earlier this season against K-State. If you go through the midseason Big 12 superlatives that both Gabe and I worked on, we actually believe that Tamin Lipsey is a Big 12 freshman, all Big 12 all freshman team member at this point. So that's obviously saying a lot for a kid who is on a team with a ton of experience, one of the older teams in the country. So to have Lipsey kind of be the type of contributor that he has been for Iowa State has been huge for the Cyclones. But I really think the experience of this team is huge. And like you talked about with Gabe Kalsher, I mean, Gabe Kalsher, when he makes shots, he allows that entire offense to go. He was 7-11 from the field against K-State earlier this season, 2 of 5 from beyond the 3-point line. K-State's going to need to defend him a little bit better. They're going to need to make sure that he's not getting very many clean looks. Yeah, no, this is going to be tough for K-State because Iowa State is also a team that if they're on, it's just kind of tough to stop them. They got a couple of guys that'll shoot a high percentage from three, like Grill and like Holmes at times. And Grill can just get like at an ungodly level of hot in games where it would not be out of the ordinary if he went and put together like an 8 of 11 performance from three. So, I mean, K-State's going to have to it's really concerning to me how they find a way to balance this game out where you have to make sure that Iowa State's not killing you from three, but you also have to make sure that you just don't get mauled inside again by Osuna. And it's a little concerning now. Like, they didn't have David Gasson the first time they played Iowa State. Maybe he would have helped, but he was apparently sick and not feeling well. That's why he didn't play very much on Tuesday night in Norman. So we don't really know like what his status is going to be, what he's going to look like. I would imagine he's better now and will be able to play, but is he going to be able to give K-State good minutes or be of use for him? I don't know. Like this, I think Bebe Ijiola has probably earned some more minutes again, and I think we'll see quite a bit of him on Saturday. I think he's going to be a pretty big part of it, and they'll need him to step up. So I don't know. This is a scary matchup for K-State. It's coming at a bad time for them. You'd think that they would like to get this game back against Iowa State and that they could have if it was, a couple weeks ago. However, now they feel like they're in a really bad place, and I think Iowa State, based off what we've seen, is a bad matchup for K-State. It's kind of easy to say that too when there's not a ton of faith in the K-State offense right now, like we talked about. It's really just been Noel and Johnson. So I don't know. I'm leaning towards taking Iowa State in this game, and I think I'm kind of going with the mindset right now. Like,
I'm not taking K-State to win a game until they show me they can win a game again, because the last 2 games, you don't get beat by Texas Tech and Oklahoma hardly ever this year in this league. If you're a good team, you lose those games. K-State lost those games to Texas Tech and Oklahoma. And so I don't have a ton of confidence that they can go out and beat a good team. The one thing they have going for them is they're playing at home, a place where they've only lost 1 time this year, and they've played really well in all of those home games. So maybe it helps to be back in Bramlage. And it was just unfortunate timing to have to, play the back-to-back road games against OU and Texas Tech. But my confidence level in K-State is pretty low at the moment.
Yeah, I think if you're kind of looking at it, like you said, it's a bad matchup, certainly on a couple different levels. But I think one of the biggest areas of concerns for this game for K-State is that Iowa State is elite defensively. They're 7th right now in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency by Bart Torvik. And if you prefer KenPom like I do for that kind of stuff, they're also pretty high there. They're also 7th in adjusted defensive efficiency by KenPom. But I don't pay for a KenPom subscription because I like that Bart Torvik provides me so much information for free. But if you kind of look more closely at Iowa State and some of the reasons that they're so good defensively, they're 2nd right now in the country in turnover percentage defensively, which is incredible. They turn their opponents over 26% of the time. And then you kind of look at some of the struggles that K-State has had in recent games with turnovers, turning over 29% of their possessions against Texas Tech, turning over 27% of their possessions against Texas. They hovered around 20% in the loss, or in the win against TCU, and then the loss at Oklahoma. But again, Oklahoma's not a team that turns you over a ton. So I think K-State's going to be challenged a lot in this aspect. If you look back earlier in the season against Iowa State, K-State only turned it over 21% of the time against the Cyclones, but they also did a pretty good job just on pure possessions. They had 14 turnovers overall.
The problem was in that game, though, was the type of turnovers, because they only turned it over 14 times, but Iowa State won points off turnovers 25-13.
Exactly.
So,
a lot of them were live ball.
Yeah.
So it's really important, I think, for K-State to limit the live ball turnovers against Iowa State, because they'll take it the other way and they'll get a layup. And for a team that really struggles offensively, the last thing you want to do is allow them to get easy buckets in transition or on the fast break, because that's how Iowa State's going to beat you.
K-State was also bad at the free throw line the first time that these teams played. They were 68% at the line. So, maybe if that changes, they're a little bit better. Keontae Johnson missed 3 free throws in the game for K-State. Desi Sills missed 2. Ish Masood missed 1, which, he went 1 of 2, but like when he's been a really good free throw shooter, all those add up. And for K-State, that's a tough pill to swallow there. So, I think they're every bit just as good as Iowa State. I think they can be better than Iowa State. The problem is right now, I don't think they're playing better than Iowa State. And that's why they got to go out and prove it on Saturday. And I'll be interested to see what the mood is like from K-State, win or lose after the game, how they approach handling it. Because I just don't know where they're going to turn to at this point, especially if they lose, what the approach for Jerome Tang is right now. So we'll have to see how it goes down. But I would assume Iowa State probably wins this game 74-67 is where I'm going to go.
It is an Iowa State team that struggles on the road. So that's certainly a saving grace for K-State. So I do expect it to be a close game. So we'll see.
All right. Any other thoughts on K-State, Iowa State before we quickly dive into a little bit of this bracketology talk that you love?
I do not.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have the full bracket tracker out later today, but as we're recording this just before 11 a.m., Joe Lunardi already has his bracket out and is just rearing to go. He's got K-State still as a 4 seed, so that's the one thing for K-State here. Their resume, even though these losses are stacking up at a weird time, their resume is still going to be really good. I think the lowest K-State could fall to at this point, because K-State's too good of a team to lose the rest of their games, but I think they could fall to a 6 or a 7, but they seem to be pretty comfortable in the 4 or 5 range right now. And if they finish strong, they could still get back up to a 3 pretty easily. There's a lot of opportunities for that, and that's still a possibility. I would not write that off for K-State, but Lunardi has them as a 4 seed going to Orlando to face Southern Miss The 5-12 matchup in that region is Xavier and VCU. A couple of other notable teams there in the top half of the bracket with K-State. Houston is the 1 seed. So that would be like a Sweet 16 matchup. And then at the bottom, Illinois is the 6, Tennessee is the 3, Providence is the 7, and Texas is the 2. So kind of an interesting grouping of teams. I think you could get a lot of good games in there. Memphis is the 11 seed in that region. So again, none of this will actually come to fruition, but it's good to kind of get an idea of what K-State might be staring down. A Southern Miss in the first round, that's probably a fine enough matchup. I'd have to dig a little deeper into Southern Miss later today. Xavier VCU, you look around at who the other 5 seeds are. You certainly don't want Creighton, and you certainly don't want Indiana if you're K-State. So I would think that Xavier or St. Mary's is the other one, is the lesser of 2 evils there. And I mean, I like Xavier. They're a good team. The thing that would scare you the most about Xavier is the fact that they shoot the ball incredibly well. They're a 40%, like a true 40% shooting 3-point team. That's a little concerning based off the way K-State has played recently. So that would be an interesting matchup to see play out, and how K-State could handle things there, because they got dudes that are just letting it fly and doing a great job.
Yeah, man, Sule Boom is awesome.
Yep.
Great name, too. I don't know if there's a better name in college basketball.
It is a good name.
Sule Boom. Unfortunately, it's not BOOM, but yeah,
No.
That's certainly a team that I don't think I'd be super excited to see if I was a K-State fan, just because of the offensive spread ability that they have. And they have started to play a little bit better on the defensive end here of late. With Sean Miller being back there, that's obviously something that he really prides his teams on. Yeah. But Jack Nungy's a good player on the interior, not an elite player, but a quality player. So this is certainly an interesting bracket for K-State. Interesting pod, I guess you could say, with VCU kind of being on the opposite side. I don't know anything about VCU, but they're projected to be the automatic qualifier from the conference, so that's obviously a good thing.
Yeah, I think the A10 is kind of down this year. If
I believe it is.
Rough knowledge has worked out.
And then Houston is a team that I'm so high on. I think they're one of the 2 or 3 teams at this point in the season where I feel confident in saying that they can win a national championship. And there's not very many of those teams that I feel great about saying they can win 6 games in a row, but Houston is probably one of them. So to potentially get them in the Sweet 16, should Kansas State make it out of their pod, is maybe not the most inspiring thing on the planet, but you get to the Sweet 16, you're going to have to play a really good team no matter who you're playing.
I think K-State Xavier would be an interesting matchup, because I think both teams have done a really good job of K-State and Xavier, that is, in finding ways to lose games at the end. I was telling you about Xavier earlier, how it feels like most of the games that I've watched this year, they've done some really stupid things at the end of the game to lose. Well, their last 2 games, they've lost at Butler and at Marquette, where they had leads in the last minute and had chances to win, and they blew their opportunities there. And then earlier in the year, they had a game at DePaul that they lost, and was just a total masterclass on how not to win a game against a bad team. So they are really good, and they've played really well, but when they're in close games, they do tend to shrivel a little bit. If you go and look at earlier in the season, they lost by 2 to Indiana, they lost by 7 to Duke, and they lost by 4 to Gonzaga. But then they ripped off a monster win streak, but games got tight again, and they had a tough time finding ways to close them out. They about let UConn come back in a game that they had a pretty sizable lead. So I think that'd be a great game between Xavier and K-State. We'd probably go to double overtime again. Just like the 2010 tournament between the 2 teams, but not because both are playing well. I think because both would just not want to win the game. So that's one of the things to be mindful of. Jerry Palm of CBS, he has not updated his bracketology yet today, but as of yesterday afternoon, he had K-State as a 4 seed, also in Orlando, taking on Liberty, and then the 5-12 there was Indiana and Charleston. And you and I have both talked about this. Indiana is not a matchup. Nobody in the tournament is going to want to see Indiana, because Trace Jackson Davis is incredible and can go off at a moment's notice. But certainly K-State, a team that has struggled inside this year, would not want to see Indiana.
No, I think you can make a case that TJD has been the best player in college basketball over the last month. Mm-hmm. Like, what he's been doing is absolutely ridiculous. And I said this to Gabe this past week when we were working on some stuff together, that TJD should be the Big Ten Player of the Year, but Zach Edey should be the National Player of the Year. If you look at what TJD's done in conference, it's absolutely just ridiculous for Indiana. He's averaging 21 points, 13 rebounds. Holy crap, that's incredible.
Yeah.
3.2 blocks, half a steal for a big is pretty incredible. So 3.7 stocks, if that's a stat that you like to keep. And he's incredible. And the jump he's taken between his junior and senior year has been monstrous. And for someone who wasn't always the highest on TJD, you always saw the potential. You always saw the chance that he would turn into this type of player because of the talent and the athleticism. To actually see it happen now, his senior year, has been insane. And his impact has really kind of sparked Indiana's run here, dating back to their win against Wisconsin on January 14th. They've won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of their last 9 games. And in those 9 games, TJD is averaging 24 points, 13.3 rebounds, and 3.2 blocks, to go along with 4.1 assists. He nearly had a triple-double in Indiana's loss to Northwestern earlier this week. I believe he came a couple assists shy of doing that. So this isn't a knock on K-State. This is no one wants to see Trayce Jackson Davis opposite them. Like, there are certain teams who maybe don't want to see it more than others. And I think UConn would maybe be a team that, okay, we can match up against TJD a little bit better than maybe Kansas State feels like they can. But there's a lot of teams in the country who do not want to see Indiana, but more specifically, they don't want to see Trayce Jackson Davis opposite them on a bracket.
Yeah. And the other thing too, from a pure K-State point, because again, I'm going to keep harping on it. Indiana, 38% from three as a team. Miller Kopp on over 100 attempts already this season is still shooting 45% from three. I know Alec is a big Miller Kopp fan after his tweet last night. But yeah,
dude,
I just
that was hilarious. Did you watch it? I watched that game instead of Iowa State.
I did not watch that.
One of my best friends is a huge Indiana fan, so I decided to watch that one, and it was quite hilarious to watch.
I just, you're right. This isn't a K-State thing; it's an Indiana thing. It's nobody will want to face Indiana because they've shown the potential to hang and beat with the best this year. Obviously, they beat Purdue, and they've played at a high level at times to get people believing. But then they've also really shrunk. So. And that's kind of the story of college basketball this year. With all these matchups, we can talk about them and say, oh, this is kind of scary. This isn't a good one. But at the end of the day, every single team in college basketball has put together a bad stretch this year where you can find a reason to pick them apart and say, oh, yeah, I don't like what I saw there. So that would be the one saving grace in all this. Other bracket watch, again, sending K-State to Orlando. So they've clearly fallen, it would appear, on the seed line to where they won't get preferential treatment of what venue they play at. The Athletic has them going to Orlando to face Drake as a 4 seed, and then St. Mary's and Liberty is the 5-12 there. You're trying to convince me that K-State shouldn't want to see St. Mary's. I think St. Mary's is the best option out of teams of possible second-round opponents that we've seen so far. And I don't know. St. Mary's has done some things at various points, but also
Aiden Mahaney's legit, man. He might be the best card on the court that night.
I don't know. I thought some of the games I've watched of St. Mary's, it's been kind of a brick fest and low scoring games.
Let me put it to you this way: you do not want to play a top 10 KenPom team and a team that's top 5 in the country in defensive efficiency.
Bring it on.
I understand that they're a mid-major. I understand that they maybe don't have the name brand recognition, but you do not want to play a top 10.
St. Mary's, that's not it. St. Mary's has the name brand recognition at this point.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do. They've been around long enough. They've been consistent enough. People know about St. Mary's. It's like
you just don't want to play a top 10 KenPom team. If you're like KenPom would project St. Mary's to beat Kansas State.
Yeah, and I would tell Ken that he's wrong. Go back to watching curling, computer boy.
It's not curling. Oh, it is curling. You're right. It is curling.
Yeah. So we'll have the full bracket tracker up in the day. I mean, looking around college basketball and where teams may end up, is there a team out there that realistically could be the K-State opponent in a second round matchup that you would say that's a clear advantage for K-State right now?
Um, how about VCU? How about Oral
Okay.
Roberts?
Well,
How
not of
about
their. I don't know. Oral Roberts scares me actually. Not of their
Oral
like.
Roberts scares you more than St.
No,
Mary's?
no, they don't scare me more. They still scare me.
Okay, fine. How about Kent State?
Okay, well, quit
Those are all
giving
the 12 seeds.
double-digit seeds. Yeah, I'm talking about, and they very well could be there and be scary. But if you look around, like some of the other options there, I don't know. It's gonna be fascinating to see.
I'm ready to get to this point in the season at this point. Like now I'm just ready for it to get here.
Yeah.
Break down a bracket and all sorts of this stuff.
Ugh,
Now is when I start to really kind of start to pay attention to it. It's the middle of February. And it feels like these last couple of weeks of the season really like drag
yeah.
a
I
lot
was. I
sometimes.
well. I'll throw it out there right now, and you haven't agreed to it, but I'm going to make you do it. We will be live on Selection Sunday as the bracket is being revealed. That way we can. What are you taking offense to that?
Yeah, I don't want to be live when it's revealed. I like to be able to take it in.
Oh, please. I like to
Also,
take it in
like
live. I like my instant reaction.
I feel like most is K State not gonna have us like there for
Oh, I don't know. They might. That's a good point. I
like I feel
don't.
like most people do some sort of media
Well,
obligations right
I don't know.
after it.
It's been 4 seasons since they were in the NCAA tournament, and I don't even remember. I don't think they did anything in 2019. I don't know. You may be right. We may have to rethink this thing. So we'll definitely do something that night or that afternoon, and go over it all. But
That I can be down with.
one other thing to keep in mind, this Saturday, the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee will be unveiling their top 16 seeds for the first time this year. I knew it had to be coming for like the last 2 weeks. I've been looking to see when it was going to happen. They did the women's one like midweek last week on ESPN. So this weekend, they will be unveiling the top 16 seeds that they have. I don't know the exact timing of it. It'll be on CBS again for before whatever games that they have tipping off there this weekend. So just be prepared for that, and we'll see. That'll give us a good idea of where the committee views K-State right now, because as we've talked, most of these bracketologists still have K-State as a 4 seed, so that would have them in the top 16. Depending on where the committee has them, maybe the committee has them higher, maybe the committee has them outside of the top 16. But that would give us a pretty good idea of where the Cats stand. So just stuff to keep in mind for the weekend, and keep on checking out EMA Online for plenty of K-State basketball coverage for both stuff that's actually happening and stuff that may or may not happen, like all the bracketologists out there that we like to follow along and pick apart. So any other thoughts before we head out and get ready for K-State Iowa State tomorrow, Alec?
No, I'm excited to see that. I always think that the releasing of the top 16 is just fun. It doesn't mean anything at this point in the season. I just think it's a way to get people excited about the NCAA tournament, and it's approaching. But yeah, no other major thoughts. Excited to see where each team is kind of seated right there, and obviously to see if Kansas State's within that top 16 seed, which I think they might be right on the borderline of potentially being a 4 seed. So I'm interested to see where that all falls on Saturday.
All right. Yeah. Be sure to take all that in. Also, K-State baseball gets their season started today, 4-game series at Stephen F. Austin to get it all underway. So if you want to take in the Bat Cats, they're on ESPN Plus tonight, 6:30 tonight, 2 o'clock tomorrow, 1 o'clock on Sunday, 3 o'clock on Monday. And if you're not wanting to pay for ESPN Plus, you can always listen to K-Man, where my man Mitch Fortner got the duties of going down there for the first series of the year. He might get to do a ton of baseball in the non-con this year, because I'm not sure how many other people are going to be able to make those trips. So be sure to take in the Bat Cats if you're a baseball fan. If not, tough luck. I mean, I'm sorry that you're lame. That'll do it for Alec and I. We are out. Be sure to follow along with everything we got coming tomorrow after the Wildcats and Cyclones, where K-State is in desperate need of a Wildcat victory.